football fans, and welcome to another player biography. As recently I took a look at the extensive career of the great LT, Lawrence Taylor, one of the best pass rushers in the history of the game. Now we take a look at a man who was also one of the all-time greats in that regard, with part one of a three-part look of his career, as we start with the early origins and somewhat of a prologue. Talking about a man who, personality-wise, was the complete opposite of LT. Talking about the Minister of Defense, Reggie White. Reginald Howard White was born on December 19, 1961 in Chattanooga, Tennessee. From a young age, White had two dreams: to be a football player and a church minister. In high school, he became a prospect, playing for the Howard High School Hustling Tigers, recording over 140 tackles and 10 sacks, and was deemed by a Knoxville newspaper as the #1 prospect for university ball. And indeed, he joined the Tennessee Volunteers football program in 1980. His drive and determination had him on the main roster just before the end of the 1980 season, and his perseverance earned him the Andy Spivo Award for Most Improved Defensive Player on the team. By 1981, Reggie White was indeed a starter for the Vols. In his first full year as a starter, White had a team-leading 8 sacks, 7 tackles for losses, and 95 overall tackles. He also blocked 3 extra point attempts, and the Vols made it all the way to the Garden State Bowl, where they defeated the Wisconsin Badgers 28-21. White was named Defensive Player of the Game with 8 tackles. His perseverance, hard work, and determination, not to mention just all-around production and leadership skills, were now making scouts in the pros take notice of the youngster. He was also named a sophomore All-American by the Football News. White, however, encountered several ankle issues in 1982, which diminished his stock and his play in his junior year. Despite this, the Vols made the 1982 Peach Bowl, but lost 28-22 to Iowa, playing a big game with 2 sacks, but still made it through the year hurt. But things changed big time in 1983. White was more determined than ever to change his fortunes. But out of all of White's critics that season, he himself was the biggest, trying himself to be better. And he did so with a huge 100 tackles and a school record 15 sacks. White went toe-to-toe during a game in the 1983 season against top offensive lineman and top prospect Bill Fralick, and had his number against Pittsburgh. He led the Vols to another bowl appearance, this time the Florida Citrus Bowl, beating Maryland and knocking future NFL star Boomer Esiason out of the game, but showed how determined he was to win, and he got himself another bowl ring. And what else? Let's see. Southeastern Conference Player of the Year, a unanimous All-American on top of that. His number would be retired by Tennessee years later. Reggie White was touted to be one of the top prospects going into the NFL draft. Some even say he could go #1. However, a rival football league was in the shadows of the NFL. And believe it or not, and yes, I can say this with a straight face, there was a chance after their inaugural season in 1983 that the United States Football League, the USFL, could succeed. They were horning in on top prospects, which made the 1984 NFL draft, a year after the historical 1983 draft, a bit of a weaker one indeed. Oh, indeed, the draft saw many talents and great Pro Bowl players selected. The USFL took a lot of top prospects. Matter of fact, they took 1983 draft pick Jim Kelly. They also had Steve Young. And later on, they take 2 Heisman Trophy winners, Herschel Walker and Doug Flutie, throwing a wrench into the league as a whole. To this day, the 1984 NFL draft has no Hall of Famers. It is the only 1980s draft class with that distinction. As for White, well, he was going to stay close to home. He was taken by the Memphis Showboats in the 1984 USFL territorial draft, meaning he could play close to home, of course, which was very enticing, no doubt, for the young defensive end. And indeed, he chose to sign with Memphis a very lucrative 5-year deal worth $4 million. The hype for White was met with much fanfare in Memphis and disappointment for NFL scouts who wanted him on their team. And why not? He had it all. He was the biggest defensive prospect since Lawrence Taylor. The Memphis Showboats, however, had another talent that, since this is Bill's Sports and a wrestling channel, I should point out, a fellow by the name of Lawrence Full, aka future wrestling star Lex Luger, as one of their players on the offensive line. They also had future CFL star receiver Derek Crawford and future BC Lions all-star Tony Parker at running back. And joining White on the defensive line, future 5-time CFL all-star, the Toaster, Brett Williams. Reggie White played his first pro game against the Philadelphia Stars and registered a sack. His first pro sack was on Stars QB, Chuck Facina. The Showboats, however, lost the game 17-9. As a matter of fact, the Showboats were not an overly stellar team as a whole. After the first 9 games, they were 2-7, but White was shining and fans were still coming to the stadium. And he had 6 sacks in those 9 games. It was named Defensive Player of the Game in a tight loss to Jacksonville, which had them fall to 2-7. White was becoming a massive fan favorite as the Tennessee Volunteer fans often made the trip to see their star in a pro uniform. As a matter of fact, things are about to turn around for the Showboats in more ways than one. After a 3-game win streak over the Pittsburgh Maulers, Washington Federals, and San Antonio Gunslingers, yes, these are all real names, where White had a sack in the last of that streak, they would drop a game to the Oakland Invaders, but White again showing that trademark hustle, garnering 2 sacks. The team would improve to 7-8, but they hit a skid to end the season and would miss the playoffs. White did have another 2 sacks against Birmingham in a loss, and had one more against Houston to end the season, taking out future NFL Hall of Famer Jim Kelly. The Showboats finished 7-11, but fans were coming out in droves to see White do his thing. Just before the USFL season ended, however, the NFL, in an attempt to win out on leverage for the bidding war of up-and-coming players, in early June of 1984, held a supplemental draft to obtain the rights mainly of USFL, but also CFL players, probably to avoid antitrust lawsuits, to open negotiations. Well, future Hall of Famer Steve Young was taken number 1 by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Future Pro Bowl running back Mike Rozier was taken, and then Giants were eyeballing Reggie White for 3rd. And it looked as if that may be the case, and Giants fans wanted it bad. Just think how close we were to seeing LT and Reggie White on the same team. But they went with future Hall of Fame offensive lineman Gary Zimmerman, but he never played a single game for them. Yes, Reggie White and Lawrence Taylor, again, that close to being together, and the Giants still went on to win 2 Super Bowls. Check out my Lawrence Taylor videos, by the way. Just imagine, though. But the Philadelphia Eagles took White 4th overall, thus now owning his NFL rights. Eagles fans were wanting to see White in the green and white, and well, after a Super Bowl appearance in 1980, the Eagles had plummeted and needed some stars and prospects to build around. But White was locked into the Showboats at least until 1987. Reggie White's first year in the pros gave him 12 sacks, which is good enough for 10th in the league. But despite being a very dynamic rusher who added much to the game, pass rusher that is, of course, who added so much to the game, he was shut out when it came to All-Star and award selections. Also, his importance as a draw to local fans in Memphis cannot be understated. The Showboats will become one of the few USFL clubs to actually increase their attendance significantly as time went on. Also, White was now officially under the Philadelphia Eagles umbrella, but him playing there, well, that was still very much an uncertainty. By the time the 1985 season rolled around for the USFL, there had been a little bit of writing on the wall in terms of the league's future, and they had the bold idea to move to the fall to complete directly with the NFL for the 1986 season. White, on the other hand, just wanted to do 2 things. Well, spread the word of God and play football. White loved his fans, however, in Memphis, signing autographs, even being exhausted after a game, talking with fans. He is beloved among fans in this town and throughout the state of Tennessee. Reggie White was loving his career. The Showboats were looking like an improved team on paper. After a 20-3 win over San Antonio to begin the season, White played a huge game against Jacksonville, winning 24-14, as White seemed to be in the face of QB Buck Buell and sacked him twice for big losses, but yet running backs couldn't also seem to escape White getting more than a yard or 2 past him the whole game. The defensive line, including White, was insane the following week in a thrilling 21-19 win over Baltimore as they combined for 4 sacks. The Showboats were 3-0, but sadly a 4-game losing streak ensued and things looked bleak, and White was still playing very well, but he just had 1 sack in the 4 games as the Showboats fall to 3-4. But they did rebound with a tight 13-10 win over Baltimore, and White couldn't get to Doug Flutie, however, in a tight 21-18 loss to the New Jersey Generals, and they fell to 4-5 at the halfway point of the season. But then they rebounded with a huge 33-17 win over the Denver Gold on the road, in front of their smallest crowd to date, in Denver that is, and telltale signs of the league, as White had 2 sacks, one of which was a safety touch, and the Showboats went on a roll. In the next game, White shook the ball loose from a Birmingham running back and took the ball with a fumble recovery touchdown, 20 yards, the first of his career, giving the Showboats a 38-17 lead and an eventual 38-24 win. White had taken full command of this entire defense. A win over the Gamblers followed, and White got to Jim Kelly once again, and they won their 4th in a row, a 38-14 win in Tampa Bay, as they now sat at 8-5. After dropping back-to-back losses, however, White had the game of his career. 3 sacks in a win over the Orlando Renegades, as the number 92 was burnt to the retinas of both Renegades QBs, as Memphis decimated them at home 41-17. The Showboats dominated Jacksonville the next week 31-0 and beat Arizona Outlaws 38-28, finishing 11-7, and guess what? The Showboats, they're off to the playoffs. The way the playoff format worked in the United States Football League was a 3-round, 8-seeded team system. which will determine their champions. And awaiting the Showboats in the first round were the Denver Gold, who had a similar 11-7 record as well. They were led by a formidable QB duo of future NFL journeyman Bob Gagliano and former Bears pivot Vince Evans. Their big star was former running back out of Arkansas Bill Johnson, who had over 1,200 yards rushing, and the awesome duo of Leonard Harris and Mark Lewis, both with 1,000 yards receiving. The Showboats, however, easily destroyed Denver 48-7, 21 first downs to 10, 492 yards of offense compared to just 229 for Denver. And our hero, you ask? A sack for a big loss of 12 yards. And now the Showboats are just one win away from heading the USFL championship game. Standing in their way, however, are the Oakland Invaders, who were feeding the appetite of Oakland football fans since they moved their beloved Raiders to Los Angeles. They were led by Bobby Hebert, a QB who would go on to have a decent NFL career, and his favorite target was future Viking star Anthony Carter at receiver. He had a dangerous backfield of Albert Bentley and John Williams that combined for nearly 1,900 yards rushing. They had one of the most dangerous offenses in the league, but hey, their defense? Oh, not too shabby either. Vito McVeer and Derek Martin each had 6 interceptions on the year. Well, also, their defense combined for a huge 56 sacks, among the best in the league, led by future CFL star Angelo Snipes. The city of Memphis has never had a major pro sports championship and was mainly known for the king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley, and the king of wrestling, Jerry Lawler. The Showboats could get a step closer, however, to bringing glory to the city of Memphis. The Invaders' offensive line, however, was containing White as well as Brett Williams throughout the whole game, as neither of them could really get to Hebert. Well, the Showboats, however, led 13-7 in the third quarter, but Hebert's 2 straight TDs to his main man Carter suddenly gave Oakland a 21-13 lead almost out of nowhere. And then Hebert's 1-yard plunge in the fourth quarter made it 28-13 as the crowd grew silent. White couldn't get near him. He was being double-teamed often on many plays throughout the game. Tony Parker, however, scored a touchdown with nearly 4 minutes to play to wake up Liberty Bowl Stadium, but a penalty cost Memphis a huge 2-point convert. The clock ran out on them, and their season was over. White's first big chance at a championship fails, but he is contained heavily, of course, in this game to make it happen, as Oakland would go on to lose the U.S.F.L. championship to Baltimore. Hey, White had an amazing year, garnering numerous accolades, as he was tied for 5th in sacks as he nearly equaled his total from last season. He made the All-USFL team as well as the Sporting News All-USFL team, and showed his leadership skills as once he took command of the Showboats defense, they became a very good winning club, and were just one win away from making it to the championship. It looked like they could be poised to win it all the next year, but, well, about that. Indeed, the writing was on the wall for the United States Football League, as the 1985 season would be their last, and many players started to see it. The Philadelphia Eagles, of course, took notice, and they needed their team to improve badly, as every season was worse than the last, it seemed. 1984 was no different. And as the NFL season was getting underway again, they were trying to negotiate with Reggie White, who had just played 20 games by July 6th. And 2 months later, could he be ready for the NFL? Well, I guess we're about to find out. As just about 3 weeks into the 1985 NFL season, the Eagles bought out White's contract with Memphis and the USFL, a 4-year, $1.85 million deal, which is a huge cut from his USFL contract, but with incentives, bonuses, and likely endorsements, White was still going to be a very rich man. Philadelphia, here he comes. And indeed, while at first it looked like the United States Football League was going to have a 1986 season, it did not happen. The league went under. But White's endearment to the fans in Memphis cannot be refuted. In just 2 short years, he accomplished a great deal, and made major headlines as one of the major college prospects to be taken and stolen, as if to say, well, for lack of a better term, to the USFL. He proved he was a pro, though, through and through. And he's finally leaving home for the first time. The Eagles, however, and their fans, the city of Philadelphia, they're ready for the Minister of Defense to preach his aggression to the elite in the NFL. And with that, that does it for part 1 of our look at the great Reggie White and the beginnings and origins of his career. Stay tuned for part 2 as we kick into high gear as we look at his unforgettable tenure with the Philadelphia Eagles as his NFL career commences. What other players would you like to see us cover? Leave a suggestion in the comments, and in the meantime, like the video, please share and hit subscribe to the channel. Until next time, I'll see ya!